cue with the story. The president has been tweeting. He writes this morning. Look how things have turned around on the criminal deep state. He calls it the criminal deep state. They go after phony collusion with Russia, a made-up scam, and end up getting caught in a major spy scandal, the likes of which this country may have never seen before.
Dear
what
God.
goes around comes around. And Joe, he finishes by saying, in all caps, Spygate, he's calling it. Spygate could be one of the biggest political scandals in history.
Yeah, Willie, I don't really know where to begin. Spygate? I mean, you have a guy that Donald Trump says is running his foreign policy, getting drunk and talking to the Australian ambassador and bragging about contacts with the Russians. And the FBI is tipped off by the Australian ambassador, and they start moving forward. And Heidi, again, Donald Trump, there are still people who actually can think clearly in this country. And for those who can, it's very obvious that Robert Mueller is getting closer and closer and closer to something that scares the ever-living hell out of Donald Trump. And now he is apparently responding today to a plea deal by the taxi king yesterday that is going to take down his fixer. And Donald Trump, obviously, now unbelievably fearful that it's going to take him down as well.
Well, you look at this tweet, Joe, and I think the reaction on Capitol Hill is going to be that this confirms their worst fears, that even though Rosenstein's calculation may be to try and put this all off, try to protect the investigation, that the president is interpreting these moves, allowing an investigation, allowing the Republicans to come in and view these Department of Justice documents as a caving. I spoke last night with Senator Blumenthal, who is trying to do something on Capitol Hill to protect both Mueller and now Rosenstein. And he's telling me that there is a lot of apprehension behind the scenes by the Republicans who he's trying to work with, that in fact the president does have Rosenstein more in his sights. We saw that yesterday, Joe, when the president was point blank asked in the Oval Office whether he has confidence in Rosenstein, and he pointedly refused to answer. So Senator Blumenthal tells me that behind the scenes it is getting harder and harder, even for these Republicans, to deny that the president doesn't somehow have Rosenstein as well as Mueller in his sights. And the senator told me, look, every time we go into one of these breaks, we're going to have another one next week. We carry that apprehension, and yet Senator Blumenthal cannot get these Republicans to join him on legislation to try and stand up to the president, or at least send a signal to the president. They know in the end the president himself would have to sign the legislation, but to at least show that they are not going to just roll over in the worst case scenario, and we do see something akin to a Saturday night massacre.
So, David Ignatius, we need to stop here as the president is now this morning building this narrative about what he calls a major spy scandal, the likes of which this country may never have seen before, labeling it Spygate, and talk about what the FBI actually did in 2016, the distinction between spies and informants. Can you lay that out a little bit for our audience?
So, during the spring and summer of 2016, from what we know, the FBI began to get reports that people who were associated with the Trump campaign had been talking about their contacts with Russia in a way that concerned FBI and U.S. intelligence officials as they began to get these reports from various ways. The most famous contact is the one that George Papadopoulos, a Trump foreign policy advisor, his comments to the Australian ambassador in London, Alexander Downer. And the FBI became concerned enough that it wanted to know what was behind these rumors, and so people who have been informants, assets, one in particular, an American professor, ex-professor in England, began to track those down. That is what our intelligence agencies do. That's their job. Had they ignored this, they would be, I think, could be accused of being derelict. it's crucial to note, as Joe did earlier in the previous segment, that the FBI said nothing about what it was doing publicly, that this information was carefully held and suppressed, but it was part of their normal counterintelligence function. What we've seen over the last, I'd say, 6 months is that the Trump counterpunch to the Mueller investigation is to add each of these extraneous details. There was a focus on Chris Steele, the former MI6 agent in Britain, and his role, and that was made to seem nefarious. Then there was a focus on the American investigator, Glenn Simpson, and his role with GPS fusion. Now the focus is on this American professor in England, all trying to make it sound like it's something conspiratorial against Trump, it's un-American, and there's really no evidence that I see to support that. And again, the central thing to remember is the FBI said nothing before the election that would have influenced voters to think that there was something going on here. They held the information and in that sense behaved entirely responsibly.
Well, and Elizabeth, beyond that, not only is there no evidence suggesting that there was anything improper, as David French with National Review wrote yesterday, it's fantastical to believe that somehow the Obama administration set up this investigation for political reasons. And again, we must repeat once again, when you had the FBI putting a letter out 10 days before the election in an extraordinarily damaging October surprise that worked against Hillary Clinton's campaign, as did the McCabe leak work against the Hillary Clinton campaign, as did the FBI silence on this ongoing investigation. Everything the FBI did worked to the advantage of Donald Trump before the election and worked to Hillary Clinton's detriment, did it not?
I mean, as our reporting has shown, the FBI moved very, very slowly on this for fear of being seen as political in investigating Donald Trump or Donald Trump's campaign right before the election. We now have reporting to show what was going on at the FBI in the fall of 2016, and they were operating under the assumption that Donald Trump was going to lose anyway, and Hillary Clinton was going to win. So therefore, you had to show some toughness on her. You didn't want to be seen as, ushering in the next Democratic president. And what was the point of opening a full-fledged investigation of the Trump campaign when he was going to lose? So that was what was going on at the FBI, which helps explain why they were moving, slowly and very carefully on an investigation into Trump associates, during the campaign. And let's not forget what's going on here. The President of the United States is now calling for an investigation of the investigators investigating him. So this is a very big deal. We don't like to use the word unprecedented at the New York Times, but this has not happened before. That we should not forget the seriousness of this.
Yeah, and Richard, it is a war on justice. It is a war on the Justice Department. It is a war on the FBI. It is a war on the intel communities. It is a war on the very institutions. It's a war on law enforcement. It's going to turn into a war against the Southern District of New York. It is a war against the very institutions that are necessary to protect and defend this republic from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And you have Donald Trump parroting certain Fox News hosts talking about something being worse than Watergate when attacking FISA judges, which, by the way, Richard, as we always find out, there's never a there. David French is right. It is always fantastical musings and conspiracy theories. Those 4 FISA judges, all Republicans. Robert Mueller, lifelong Republican. The FBI director appointed by Trump, a Republican. The Attorney General, beloved by Donald Trump until he decided to actually do the right thing and pass the investigation onward. Rosenstein, a Republican. The head of the Senate Intel Committee, who said the Russians were interfering, a Republican. I could go down the whole list. This is the most Republican Washington and investigation that I think we have seen in our entire lifetime.
Joe, you used the word war, and you're right, but it's as if one side is fighting consistent with all the Geneva Conventions, and that's the Justice Department, the media, the courts, the FBI, all the institutions you've talked about. And the other side, the president and his backers and his enablers, they're not. They're going way beyond the laws of war. They're willing to use any weapon. They're willing to attack anybody. And the question, therefore, what's in doubt is whether those who truly are conservatives, small c, who believe in institutions, believe in the rule of law, believe in the DNA in some ways of our democracy, whether they will prevail against the president and, again, his backers and enablers who are not willing to accept such limits or are willing to go way beyond the laws of war, the legitimate ways of pursuing political ends for their own purposes here. And I think it's an open question, but that's where we are, and it sounds melodramatic, but I don't think it is. I think the stakes, with every tweet, with every day that passes, the stakes go up.
Again, this morning, the President of the United States using the term criminal deep state, saying it's a major spy scandal, the likes of which this country may never have seen before.